Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Michael, and I'm really happy to be here again with my co-worker, Dr. Charlene Koch.
Hi.
And we have been talking about anxiety and depression, and we've done a series of tapes to this point. We started out talking about how our thoughts create our feelings, both conscious and unconscious thoughts. Then Dr. Koch tried to explain sort of the foundation of Chinese medicine, our balance, how the organ systems have a balance in Chinese medicine, the flow of qi. And then we talked about the neuroendocrine system, how our nervous system and adrenal glands or endocrine system balance and develop, and how we can be predisposed to having a tendency toward a mood or even a mood disorder. So you had sort of a foundation of, it's not just a mood or not a mood. It really is this interaction with our whole physiology, how we've developed. Part of it's genetic. Today we're going to talk about neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters are chemicals in the brain that have a specific impact on certain moods. And again, this genetic influence with these neurotransmitters is partially genetic. We have some capacity biochemically set to create more or less of some of these neurotransmitters. But remember what I said in previous lectures, that genetic expression is also variable, that there's a lot of influences on genetic expression, and a lot of those have to do with our lifestyle, diet, the surroundings we live in, our thoughts, our feelings, practices we do like meditation or yoga, even the kind of people we hang around in, or the kind of environment we create, if you have that opportunity that you work in. So some of the main neurotransmitters that we're going to talk about today, serotonin, GABA, acetylcholine, and dopamine, are these chemicals in the brain that relay information to another nerve or to the surrounding tissue. And they influence our mood, our energy, our ability to think, to be sort of focused, to, excuse me, to have attention, to remember. So these chemicals are really important and have a big influence on our mood. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today, and how each of those neurotransmitters is more specific and can become deficient, and what that looks like. Kind of an aside from the neurotransmitters that affect our brain chemistry is also the idea that all these neurotransmitters are also found in our gut. In fact, the neurotransmitter serotonin that many people are familiar with, because that one's often associated with depression, 90% of our serotonin is made in our gut. So we do have a whole neurotransmitter system in the second brain, which is considered the gut, which influences how our peristalsis, or the muscles of the gut, work. It influences the immune system in the gut specifically, but then that translates to our immune system in general. It has to do with the kinds of secretions that are made, our production of enzymes, even our appetite. So so again, I guess in a way, I want to reinforce that biochemistry cannot be isolated. Whatever we're talking about biochemistry in the body, even though it might be primarily about the brain, it's happening in other places. So one thing to think about with that is when you influence biochemistry for a specific effect, let's say in the brain, you have to also consider where those neurotransmitters are in the body, because you might get secondary effects. A little story I want to talk about is when I was really young, kind of preteen, 13, 14 maybe, I was really depressed. I've struggled with anxiety and depression, so maybe that's why I've learned so much about it, because it's been a journey of my own healing. But I used to wake up in the morning and just tune into how I was feeling and know right then I was either going to have a bad day or a good day. I would wait for my body to tell me, because it would be sort of a feeling of just, not malaise, but just, I didn't feel good in my tummy. I didn't really feel good in my energy. And what I felt during that time was often I felt better if I didn't eat. Now, I didn't really have any association. Now, as a naturopath, I can correlate foods and food allergies, food sensitivities, the wrong kinds of foods, but I didn't have that knowledge at that age. And so I didn't really get that association. I just started to realize I felt better when I didn't eat. So that kind of led to more eating disorders, anorexia for a while. And it was really interesting as I got more information that I learned low serotonin suppresses your appetite. And I did kind of have that predisposition to depression. I also learned, if you listen to my gut health lecture, a lot about how the health of the gut or unhealthy gut then impairs our ability to make some of these neurotransmitters. And of course, if you have an unhealthy digestive tract, you can't absorb the nutrients to make them. So there was this seeking of knowledge for me. That is partly why I became a naturopath. It really was part of my own evolution of healing, patience, trial and error, and learning from other doctors about how supports in different ways could impact how I could affect my mood, eventually be happier, feel calmer. And so I just want to bring that up because all of these lectures in some way will apply to our moods. So again, the main neurotransmitters we're going to talk about are serotonin and GABA, which tend to be the calming neurotransmitters, sort of keeping the autonomic nervous system or our nervous system in general balanced. And then dopamine and acetylcholine, which are more the energy, nerve stimulating neurotransmitters. So we'll start with one at a time and give you just a little synopsis of those. And we were saying that, none of these work in isolation. Some of the symptoms of deficiency or the symptoms of that characteristic, a person who has that characteristic of that neurotransmitter, they overlap. They're not, so all the two that are stimulating are similar in some ways, but also a little different. So when you try to start pinpointing, well, which one is mine? It's not that straightforward. It's actually pretty complex because the men, even when they're working together, they're often stimulated by the same nerve, but in varying amounts to kind of balance one another. So I'll go on. Serotonin is probably the neurotransmitter most commonly heard about because a lot of the medications for depression, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors or SSRIs, work on serotonin. So you can associate serotonin with the feeling of joy, being happier, feeling satisfied in work or relationships, and sustaining sleep. And when you have a personality that is more of a serotonin-like personality, they tend to be optimistic, enjoy their surroundings, they're able to stick with what they're doing and kind of find their pleasure, find their bliss. I always think of my daughter, we always said she had the happy disease. Yeah. Because she was always happy. Yeah. Except when she hit puberty. And then I kind of supported serotonin, and it really made a difference. It was a very quick fix for her, and definitely sort of her personality came back. So serotonin is commonly deficient, and signs of a deficiency are loss of joy, loss of interest, being a little more irritable, irritable bowel syndrome. Remember, serotonin has a lot to do with gut health, so that irritable bowel or that chronic constipation and diarrhea type syndrome. Anxiety can be associated with the serotonin deficiency, feeling overwhelmed, not enjoying food, that loss of appetite, and not enjoying relationships. So the next sort of calming, neurotransmitter is GABA. And that tends to be in the body or in the brain to give sort of a peaceful sensation, to calm the activity of the brain down a little bit. It actually helps you sleep, stay more in that parasympathetic state of being relaxed, helping to support sleep, getting to sleep and staying asleep, and helping you to relax. So a GABA personality tends to be a very sort of consistent type person, grounded. They have care for others, set goals, they're very reliable, and a bit of a steady nature. So then the opposite of that, if you're deficient in GABA, would mean that you can't turn your brain off. You might have a sense of dread. You're maybe inner tension instead of being grounded. You sort of feel this state of inner tension, disorganized. Often that physical sensation of anxiety where your stomach's sort of tied up in knots. That might be a sign of a GABA deficiency. Then the two neurotransmitters that tend to be more energizing to the nervous system, the first one would be dopamine. It has to do with our being alert. It's generally stimulated by cortisol, which in the morning, cortisol should be relatively high when you have the most. And that supports this ability to have that dopamine so you can focus, kind of get going, look forward to the day, kind of get organized, have attention and brain power. And you think of a lot of the ADD, ADHD conditions as having some dysregulation of dopamine. Often they're supported by drugs that enhance that dopamine. And even think about people who get addicted to like their cell phones, computer games. Those are very dopamine stimulating activities, or they tend, even the lights and some of those things stimulate dopamine. So if people have a dopamine deficiency, they can actually sort of go to that or be more inclined to have that addiction to that kind of stimulation. People who are dopamine types, where that's kind of their preferred neurotransmitter, where they have kind of the strength of their personality, would be strong-willed, very confident, rational, more matter-of-fact, and probably intellectually or knowledge-driven. And again, if you have that dopamine deficiency, we can think of hard to pay attention, hard to get the brain going, sometimes just fatigue and depression, anxiety, social anxiety, feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness. And again, one way you can tell if you have a deficiency is you are attracted to those things that stimulate the dopamine. So even stimulants like caffeine or drugs like cocaine, those games, those things that really get that neurotransmitter stimulated because you're more on the deficient side. And then acetylcholine is the other neurotransmitter that we think of as energizing to the brain. It's responsible for thinking, memory, arousal, controls the brain's speed and the rate of learning, the rate of processing. Acetylcholine, though, is also used in the peripheral body to, get muscles to work. So again, these neurotransmitters we think of as we talk about them in brain chemistry, but they're working all over the brain all over the body in different ways. I just keep emphasizing that because when you start doing interventions with drugs or with more holistic interventions, you want to look at the ramifications of that, and it sometimes or often does explain the side effects. Again, I sort of got off track there, but a personality that has more of an acetylcholine type edge would be someone who's quick thinking, creative, impulsive, intuitive, innovative, especially with words, ideas, and communication. And then a deficiency in acetylcholine might be learning, memory problems, and decreased concentration. Again, you can see dopamine and acetylcholine in a deficiency might look very similar, but have a little different personality if you're trying to figure out which particular amino acid or neurotransmitter tends to be waning for that person or in some ways deficient. So another thing I wanted to talk about is when you're trying to figure out what is the neurotransmitter that might be deficient or needs the balance, is as a doctor I'll listen to people's stories about their life, and if there's a history of drug use or alcohol use, that'll often tell you, because the neurotransmitter that is deficient is often enhanced by chemicals. And I heard a doctor once who had a treatment center in Canada talk about addiction, and he said any chemical can be addictive. It depends on that person. And he didn't break it down by specific neurotransmitters, but people who tend to be addicted to stimulants tend to have that dopamine deficiency. People who are addicted to carbs and probably alcohol, sugar, chocolate maybe even, tend to be maybe more on the serotonin deficient side. So you kind of think about what people go to for comfort, and it's in some ways trying to balance this biochemistry of the brain, and they feel better, or they even feel normal when they do a drug or a food or something, and that's seeming to correct, at least temporarily, what is going on in their brain. Let's see. When you use a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, like the common SSRI drugs, what that's doing in the brain is preventing the serotonin from breaking down so it can be recycled and keep hitting the next neuron, or we call it the neuron synapse. So there is a way to get more serotonin around to enhance that, but that also creates some side effects because, as we said before, we're affecting the breakdown of serotonin in the gut and in different parts of the body. So some of the side effects that you can see from this SSRI drugs are drowsiness, nausea, dry mouth, insomnia, diarrhea, nervousness, dizziness, and even sexual desire, libido. So again, when you're going to go for a higher force intervention, it's not that it's wrong. You just want to be aware and understand why those side effects are there and why you may be more susceptible to those side effects. And the tricyclic, another type of antidepressant, which works on enhancing serotonin and blocking acetylcholine, again, override the system, and you can get symptoms of similar symptoms like the SSRIs. Another problem with those is once you've intervened in that way and interfering with their breakdown, the body becomes dependent on a certain level, and so you have to, being sustained by the drug, and it often takes quite a while to be on the drug to get to therapeutic level. But then the withdrawal is very dangerous if you just stop, because your own body is not supporting that level of serotonin, so you can have a really difficult time getting off unless you do it in the correct way. And even doing it in the correct way can take quite a long time. You can feel headaches, lethargy, a lot of gastrointestinal disruption from diarrhea, cramping, nausea and vomiting, really bad headaches, nightmares, suicidal ideation, dizziness, and problems in balance. I mean, just the list goes on. So it's very important, anyone listening to this, don't stop your medications if you're doing them because there is a way to work naturopathically with enhancing some of the neurotransmitters that have been enhanced by medications as you withdraw. And that is probably something that we have some more information to share with you, but that should be with medical supervision and should be guided by somebody who knows what they're doing. So Dr. Koch is going to talk a little bit more about how to enhance neurotransmitters in a more diet, nutrition sort of intervention or approach. Again, the impact of that is to offer the body what it needs to support these neurotransmitters. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. Dr. Lynn, talking about the different neurotransmitters, I'm going to, and actually helping support that, I'm going to talk about it in terms of you're actually not on medication, because like Dr. Lynn was saying, that if you are on medication, you really need to consult and work with someone and to be really clear which drug you're on and which pathways are being affected. But some common ways that we support our serotonin levels and boost it, which I think of kind of the happiness or joy, which you were talking about your daughter, Christy. Some of the common ways is we do through like 5-HTP, tyrosine, fish oil or essential fatty acids, which help support the nerve cells and the transmissions of the neurotransmitters. And magnesium. So there's going to be a lot of like herbs that will be involved that we use, neurotransmitters, minerals, vitamins that can be just depleted over time when you're on medications or even when you're not on medications, that would support these pathways to make certain neurotransmitters that you've determined that you need or a provider determines that you need. Something that for GABA, when I think about GABA is like that calming, like at night you can't sleep and you need to calm down. We think of like melatonin or L-theanine is a really good one, valerian root, passion flower, and then different types of B vitamins are really good in supporting the GABA. And then when Dr. Lynn was talking about focus, some acetylcholine boosters would be like phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylcholine, DHA, which is part of like essential fatty acids, ginkgo biloba, and also a Korean ginseng is a good one, so an herb. And then some dopamine boosters when you think about alertness. I really like rhodiola. I use that quite a bit, and different types of Bs, but a good B complex is really good in supporting that pathway. Again, ginkgo biloba, phenylalanine, tyrosine. So those are some just basic nutrient support that you could consider to kind of support those pathways. Some people are on different SSRIs. We think of like Zoloft or Paxil or other antidepressants, and you will see the medication isn't working that well. And sometimes just adding something like methylfolate would be really good, and methyl B12s in like the correct forms. They do find in studies that if you're just getting like a partial response, that if you just add in those forms, you will actually get a better response on the medications. But once again, check with your doctor and discuss that with your doctor. And when we are tapering off of medication, it really depends on how long you've been on the medication and what dosage you are at, because if you haven't been on it very long and it's at a lower dosage, it's much easier to come off of the medication maybe a month or two. But if you've been on a long time, it could be a year or more to come off of it. And there's just different symptoms that we can help support, and we can help support different pathways as you're coming off of it. And I don't know about you, but even beforehand doing that, I like to supplement with certain nutrients, even 2 or 3 months, even before I start tapering off of the medication. And I mean, it's definitely possible. In most cases, we can do it, but in some cases, it's actually more important to stay on the medication. But you can usually lower it quite a bit and support it other ways.
It's always, I always think it's a good idea to start with the natural supports, the nutrients and the amino acids that help build those neurotransmitters, and then if that doesn't work, go to an antidepressant. But you know, it's certainly a personal call. Yeah,
definitely. I like to do it that way as well. But lots of times we get patients coming in who are on the medications and just want to go off of it, and it is doable. We do it all the time. It's a process. And it is something I like to do. I like to help people with that because it can be pretty life-changing. Sometimes on the medication you're only getting partial response, or even just us supporting the medication you're on can make a huge difference. And then I just wanted to summarize, different lifestyle supports that we've been talking about over time. We talked about a lot about emotion. In Chinese medicine, has an effect on the energy and the meridians. And so when we think about like the emotion anger, it's affecting the liver meridian. But depression and anxiety can look different. So in the liver meridian, it can be depression with anger. So or the heart meridian, it can be depression and anxiety. So there's different types of ways that depression and anxiety look like, just like what we were talking about with neurotransmitters. And so it's kind of a complex process, and we might have to do multiple things to kind of address what kind of pattern is going on. And also just to support neurotransmitters, healthy diet is really critical. So you want complex carbohydrates. So, you're really thinking about like healthy whole grains, if you can have whole grains, fruits and vegetables, because you really want to get those nutrients in that support all the different pathways, all the different cofactors in the enzymatic processes to make the neurotransmitters and support that. And protein. Yeah. So protein is really critical to make the neurotransmitters. We need the amino acids from the protein to make the neurotransmitters, and also to keep our blood sugar really steady. Protein really helps with that. And so if we're keeping the neurotransmitters if we keep the energy really steady, our blood sugar really steady, then we won't have the fluctuations in the neurotransmitters as well, because we can start seeing anxiety and depression just if you all of a sudden get this huge spike in glucose in your blood sugar. You can see changes immediately. And so that's why it's so critical that if you're having issues or any kind of mood disorders, to really try to eat healthy fats, to just so you're making sure that you're making healthy cells, the membranes around the cells are functioning, the neurotransmitters can communicate with the nerve cells. You're getting your protein just for steady blood sugar and to get your amino acids. Your complex carbohydrates, you're getting a lot of your B vitamins that are really important cofactors in the enzymatic process. I feel like I'm leaving something out, but like fruits, fruits and vegetables for your vitamins and your minerals, and to avoid stimulants as much as you can is really critical, like caffeine and alcohol, because it really is affecting the neurotransmitters. And then lastly, we were really talking about different things that we can do to help with help us process our emotions, get more into a parasympathetic rest and relax state, because we just tend to be on overdrive in this society, and we see more of that overdrive and exhaustion and wired but tired feeling. So that's when we are talking about, you might consider different techniques like emotional freedom technique or emotional code, which at one point Dr. Lynn and I, we hope to do a video on that, which would be really helpful. Acupuncture, do a video just kind of showing you what a session would look like that would be really calming to the nervous system. We think about different exercises like Qigong and Tai Chi, or meditation. I'm thinking breathing, yes, like that's critical. That's one of probably, most critical. It's really getting a nice oxygen in your body and also stimulating or activating the parasympathetic system, that calming and relaxing. And
I think we've covered
yeah,
a lot
I think
of it.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think our goal is really to give you sort of a holistic perspective of anxiety and depression. We've covered quite a lot of of the idea about it's not one system of the body. It's not just in the brain.
Right.
And you've covered a lot of therapeutic approaches we might use. If you want more information and you want to keep listening to these little talks, we'd really appreciate it. You can check out our websites that follow the talk on the video there, and check out our services. And if you want consultations, there's contact information there, and we'd love to share more. We just, I think, have this trust that the pieces of information that you receive will start building, and that if you have the desire to get well and to see your mood improve, and you want to do it in a more natural, holistic approach, that what you're today isn't unique. It's in books, it's other doctors talk about it. So start putting those pieces of information together for you. Both of us have been on a healing personal journey, and we're doing work we love, have a passion for what we're teaching, because it's made such an impact not only in our own lives, but in the lives of thousands of patients. And I again just have to say that I trust the healing power of the body. A lot can change in a short amount of time if you have the skill, you have the resources, you use supports that can be really directive and save you a lot of time.
Yes.
So good luck, and thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you.